Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Jon Bassford. Jon is an operations professional and entrepreneur driven by his curiosity. Curiosity is his superpower, and it has driven his personal and professional advancement. After law school, Jon put this curiosity to work launching, managing, and improving operations for venture-backed startups to global nonprofits with impact. Also, Jon is the author of The Curious Leader, Unlocking Innovation, Empowering Teams, and Driving Change. Jon, congratulations on the book and welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Have you always been a curious guy?
I have. I would say when you're younger, it kind of portrays a little differently than what it does today. I was an inquisitive kid who always kind of was around the adults, asking questions and being inquisitive, but also was someone who challenged the status quo as a kid and questioned things I wasn't supposed to question at that age and that sort of thing. So it goes with the good and the bad a little bit. But I've now harnessed my curiosity into really kind of driving organizations forward through operations.
Okay, so you question things that you weren't supposed to as a kid, meaning like what? What do you mean?
I mean, for what adults, period, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in the Midwest conservative area, and you don't question adults.
Where'd you grow up?
Decatur, Illinois is where I grew up.
Okay. I'm in Nebraska.
Okay,
Middle of
gotcha. Yep,
Nebraska.
gotcha. Yeah,
So I totally get it.
yeah. So if you don't know where Decatur, Illinois is, it's north, south, east, west. It's right in the middle of the state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. Okay. So was there a point in your life when you kind of realized that you could make a difference, like have influence, shape the future?
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those weird things to talk about in some regard. But kind of early on in my career, and even back in college, back in high school, kind of had this drive that I was meant to do something good. I didn't know what that was, right? I didn't know the shape of it, size of it, anything, context, nothing. But I felt that I was destined to kind of do something great and help people out. And as I've gone on my career and helped organizations grow and I really started focusing on recently with the Curious Leader stuff is not just focusing on the organization, but the leader themselves and bringing, that to the forefront. And, it's our careers, our personal journeys are all journeys. And it's been an exciting one for me as of late with the book, which I don't know that but my TEDx finally released as well.
Oh,
I
great.
just literally released yesterday or Monday. So I am now a TEDxer as well. And so
Congratulations.
just taking what I've learned about curiosity and looking at my own life and how I helped organizations and trying to bring that to as many organizations and leaders as possible.
So you might notice this when we're in the, doing this conversation, but like you'll say something and I'll be curious about it. So I'm going to go back to when you said it's kind of a weird thing to talk about. Why do you mean that? What
I
do you
don't
mean by
know.
that?
It's just kind of weird, to have that feeling like you're destined for something great, right? But you don't quite know what that is. And I mean, obviously, the reason why I'm saying it feels kind of weird is like, is there some egotistical aspect behind that? Like, it's not what's being driven by, right? The goal here is obviously to impact people and organizations and one thing I've really been working on lately is really expanding my public speaking
Yeah.
and doing corporate workshops, that sort of stuff, because that really allows me to reach more people. When I made a change in my consulting from just doing individual fractional COO work for clients to going more into like this audit consulting coaching aspect, one reason behind that was it allowed me to take the skills that I achieved over the last 20 years and really do build it in a way that help as many people as possible. Where fractional CEO work, I was limited to 3 to 5 clients at a time, where now we can be helping 20, 30, 40 clients a month.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I have to say, I get what you're saying. Like I wrote a book about my own struggle with whether or not to like stop holding back and release the real you is the subtitle of my book. So I get that because
Yeah,
there's a sense, and I think it's not just people who are entrepreneurs that have this feeling
sure, sure.
sometimes, like leaders have that. They
Mhm.
know that they're supposed to make a difference. They feel like they should. Um, but I also recognize that there are people who don't necessarily see how they could help shape the future
Sure.
and have an influence. And so it's really, I think, an interesting conversation to have. And I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, again, it's kind of always been there for me. I
Yeah.
don't know where it comes from and where it was derived from, I guess is the right word here, but it's kind of always been there, and I continue to be curious about what it is that I can do and what I should be doing in order to bring that about and be the most impactful in my career, my personal life, everything else.
Yeah. So when you hear the phrase curious leader, there are some maybe typical things that kind of come to mind, like somebody who's interested in finding and solving problems, finding solutions. What for you defines a curious leader?
Yeah, so I'd say there's more than a definition of characteristics. You kind of mentioned some, right? Like the ability to ask questions. That's probably one of the biggest things in really breaking down curiosity is being willing and able to ask questions and have them asked of you as well. I think from a leader standpoint, that's often where there's a divide, right? I ask things of you, my staff. You don't ask things of me, but having that kind of 360 way of questioning things and what we're doing. There's an aspect of we talked earlier about when I was a kid, like challenging the status quo, in thinking outside the box. It's about not being limited by your current situation and your current mindset, your current operations, and really thinking about how can we build and grow beyond that. And so, in my book, I talk about there being three shifts that need to happen to be a curious leader: a shift in mindset from a fixed to a growth mindset, a shift towards operational excellence, which I define as an organization's ability to drive the intended results as quickly and efficiently as possible. And then also, unless you are the lead singer of a one person band, you got to bring the team along with you. So it's building a curious culture. And that's really kind of built around a concept that Google really kind of defined, which was psychological safety in an organization, which is just an organization that builds trust where people can feel they can ask questions, they can push back, they can point out when something's wrong. The number of times, organizations have staff who something gets pointed out to them like, hey, this has been wrong. Oh yeah, I knew that. Right, like people know, they just don't feel comfortable or don't feel motivated to speak up and speak out to correct those things. And one of the things I like to say is kind of similar to here in the DC metro area on the metro. You see something, say something, right? Kind of the criminal justice police kind of way of looking at things. Well, that needs to be in our organizations. When you see
Yeah.
something wrong, when you see something not being effective, speak up and say something so we can get to the bottom of it and fix it.
Mm, yeah, great point. I wanted to read a couple of quotes from your book because you're
Sure.
just talking about this particular topic. So I want to go to this. On page 120, you say, as a curious leader, it's your responsibility to challenge the status quo while staying true to your organization's identity. And then, kind of previous to that, a couple pages, 117, you say, a clear and effective decision making framework is the backbone of aligning an organization's actions with its identity, values, and long term goals. It's more than just a set of processes, it's a way to guarantee that decisions consistently reflect the organization's purpose and mission. So I'm wondering if you could just talk to us about the balance between challenging the status quo and maintaining the organization's identity.
Yeah, so I believe every aspect of organization needs evaluation from time to time. But who your organization is, what its core principles are, what its values are, those sort of things, those should be reviewed less often, right? Because those are the pillars. So you got to have something. You got to have that foundation that you're building on and saying this is what drives our organization. We could talk about Simon Sinek's start with why. Why are we doing this? An organization that has innovation as bedrock and how they operate. Steve Jobs, Apple, et cetera. Like that's got to stay there. That's part of their DNA and how they operate. But outside of that, that's where the questions should exist. And a great example, I mentioned Steve Jobs, a great example of that. And I don't know if this is folklore or actually true or not, but it makes sense for the topic. People kept bringing him these prototypes of the next generation of a phone, the very first, iPhone, what became the iPhone. And they all had keyboards like the Blackberries and everything else that we had been using, for 5 to 10 years prior to that. And he finally said, why does there have to be a keyboard? That was challenging the status quo. They didn't change that they were building a phone. They didn't change that they're a technology company, but he challenged the status quo of this is the way a phone has always looked, with this screen on top, with this keyboard down below. And he had to ask, like, why does it have to be that way? And lo and behold, they created a phone without a keypad, and that's what became the iPhone, and now Android and everything else, right? So he had the audacity to say, why does it have to be that way?
What do you think it takes to kind of build that muscle? Because that's a question that not everybody asked
Yeah.
or would ask.
Yeah, I think there's certain individuals where it's just natural. There's a very innateness about it for many people, and by no means am I putting myself with Steve Jobs in hierarchy here, but like again, it kind of comes naturally to me to question things. When I walk into an organization, I'm immediately, lifting the hood, looking at what they're doing, why they're doing it that way, and saying, look, is this the best way? So if you don't have that natural ability to kind of just do it, you got to create these mechanisms in your life, in your work, whatever, however you want to look at this, that allows you to say, okay, this is what we're doing, and just taking a step back and asking the question why, asking how, asking the what, asking all the W questions that really can help break down, what it is, what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it that way, to truly analyze things.
Yeah. I that makes sense. I mean, it is hard to think outside the box. And I'm sure that there's just a certain amount of creativity that some people, possess innately, but then sometimes people need to let it, like you mentioned, psychological safety. It's not going to just come out unless people feel like it's okay for them to
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, and so that psychological safety aspect was derived from a study Google did. They were trying to, it was called Project Aristotle. They were trying to define what made a team successful within Google. So they did surveys and interviews, all of these things. They had their hypotheses of diversity and degrees and technological experience, all this type of stuff. And what they came down was psychological safety, which is those teams where just truly can have that free flow of ideas that go unencumbered. It breaks down silos, it breaks down hierarchy, and just allows that team to truly engage in meaningful discussion, meaningful questions to really get to the heart of matters. One of the exercises I like to do in workshops when I'm in a boardroom or a small team is have people solve a problem their organization is facing, but they can only do it by asking questions. So we just go around the room, and you can't say anything definitive, right? Every statement from one person to the next has to be a question, and little by little, you just see the light bulbs go off. They're like, oh yeah, like we're on to something here. Like you just see it, and no one was. It just there's Einstein says curiosity has its own reason for existing, and by asking these questions and breaking things down, you're just able to see solutions in a very different way.
This makes me think of something else that I was wondering about before, when thinking about this conversation. And it kind of has to do with when to open yourself to curiosity and when to let yourself come to a conclusion, basically, like make a decision. Do you have any thoughts about, like, how does one know when to say, okay, you know what? I think I'm good. I think it's time to move forward.
Yeah, yeah, that's tricky, right? It's tricky to know when you have all the information and when the right time to make it. I call that paralysis by indecision. And I tend to see that more in leaders, CEOs, COOs, et cetera, that are making a decision about some kind of topic area that they're not the most comfortable in, right? So what they tend to fall into is being afraid of making the wrong decision, so they don't make any decision.
Mm-hmm.
Or in a lot of times how they disguise that is like what you're kind of getting at is they keep getting more and more information. And so there's no secret sauce as to when you have enough information, right? That is kind of a personal decision. The perfect be the enemy of the good, as they always say. Don't let a little bit of fear, a little bit of discomfort get in the way of making a decision. And there's some things that I really like to do to help get to that information. One is something I talk about in my book, is dare to be dumb. Sometimes the reason why we don't go as deep in discovering the information we need because we don't want to look stupid.
Yep.
And when I am vetting a new solution or new vendor, I love playing dumb. Like explain it to me like I'm a kindergartner, and I take what one vendor says to me, and I don't like share proposals or anything, but I use the information that vendor A gave me, go to vendor B and be like, well, this one over here is saying this is the best way to do that. Why is yours better? And I take B back to A. So I don't even personally have to do all the vetting. I let them vet each other. I let them provide the holes and gaps maybe that I'm not seeing in A and B solutions. That just helps you get that much more information without you having to be the subject matter expert and then coming to a certain point where like, okay, I've vetted all the possible. I've done my due diligence. You know, some of this is a little bit of art and not science. You got to kind of follow your gut to a certain degree as well, I would say. As long as you've done the due diligence, as long as you've put the work and effort in, at a certain point, you got to say, my hunch tells me that this is the way to go and then execute on that.
Hmm. Okay. Similarly, there's been times when I've realized that I'm rehashing a decision that I've already made and
Mm.
it's not productive. And so that's one of the things that actually my husband and I, who's also a business owner, but we kind of think like this together when we're talking through things like, and then we were going to buy a car recently, and we had talked through all these different options, what we were looking for, what we wanted. And then we went to go actually see a car. And he started asking those questions again, like, well, do
Mm.
we want this? Do we want that? Does it make sense? And I was like, I feel like we've already made those decisions. Can we just rely on what we've already done? So, and that's what we'd ended up doing. And he's like, yeah, that's true. But I think that's another thing that I'm kind of wondering about is, how do you decide when it's time to rehash something and it is a good time, you should take a step back and relook at it, or when you just move forward?
Yeah, so I would say the time to rehash is has something changed,
Mm.
externally or internally? Have I gotten some more information? Do I have a new perspective? Did I see a new color? Did I see a new trim of the car? Did something happen that now I have some additional information, some different insights, different perspective on what may be best that we need to reevaluate that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Okay. Why do you think that curiosity? Now, I really think curiosity is important right now, and your book is very well timed. Obviously, it's always been important, but like feels like really important right now. Can you tell me why you think it is important right now?
Yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, everything's crazy, right? Just the world is crazy, business is crazy, stock market is crazy, governments are crazy,
And it's all in
everything.
our face all the time.
Yeah, I mean, yes, 100%. And things are changing quicker than we ever could imagine. And I'm not, saying any of it's good or bad. It just that's the reality we live in, and because of that, we really got to get curious. I'd say, even away from the business and leadership side of things, but just even on a kind of personal side, is like get curious about who you are and what you want out of life and what it means and what you believe and what's real and not real and for you and what matters. We get so caught up in all the noise of the world. I had to come to my wife at one point. I was like, we got to stop talking about some things like in the news, like in pointing out when this happens and that happens as like we're getting inflamed by this, we're getting drawn into this, and we might have some people in our lives that affects their lives, but it's not affecting ours. We're going to be there for them regardless of whatever happens. And we got to stop being consumed with that, right? So being curious about what really matters for you, where does value get added, who's in your life, where, when, and why. So ask some questions about that, and just constantly be looking at what's the right way to live here, what's the best solution, what's the best way to move forward, how can we make a turn a bad situation into a good. Because as again, talking about business and stock market, et cetera, for every downturn, there is an enormous upside. There's, Warren Buffett or whoever you want to quote for this is like the time to be buying is when everyone else is selling. So every time there is a crisis, there's concern, there's fear, there's anxiety that's hitting the marketplace, the world, whatever. There's also always opportunities to tap into if you can pull yourself out of the anxiety, pull yourself out of the fear, get away from all the minutia, and be curious about what's possible for you and your family and your business.
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to get drawn in and
100%.
yeah. Yeah. Um, let's see here. So, I feel like I had a question now. I'm trying to remember what it was. I tried to write them down and I don't always remember to do that. Oh yeah. Um, okay. So one of the things that I love about curiosity and questions is how they can diffuse or de-escalate problems.
Sure.
Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I will quote the Taoist philosopher Ted Lasso. Um,
Yes.
be curious, not judgmental. I believe Walt Whitman originally said it, but that's where I learned the quote was from Ted Lasso. And so curiosity, true curiosity, is not about being judgmental. So obviously, I say that with going into questioning and diffusing situations with questions, you got to have the right intent.
That's so
If you are
true.
being judgmental, if you're being derogatory, accusatory, that sort of thing, it's not going to serve the same purpose.
Do you think this is really helpful right now?
Right, exactly. Or were you drunk when you did that? Like, yeah,
Yeah. Not exactly a diffusing question.
yeah. But true curiosity in the purest form is about being helpful. It's about being inquisitive, to be helpful, to be a servant leader, right? A lot of the aspects of the curious leader when I write about it, there's a huge backbone of that it aligns with the concepts of a servant leader, right? And not being on top of your throne, looking down on the peasants, right? It's about getting to know them, getting involved with them, and asking questions and allowing questions to be asked. So creating that culture, that psychologically safe culture, is what's truly going to allow that questioning to happen and diffuse. Because if you have a culture where, employee A came from a very toxic boss who always demean them and look down on them and talk down to them, you coming in, even if you are being a servant leader and asking these questions, if you haven't built that trust with them, it's going to backfire. So that's why this is kind of all very circular, right? You can't have one without the other, and you kind of have to work on all of it together. And that's one thing that I really kind of discovered when writing the book is like how connected all these elements and pieces I've been working on, how they really have to rely on one another to get the next apart. And so kind of back to your core question is, yeah, when you're approaching people from a truly servant leadership standpoint and truly from curiosity, um, the questions allow, again, kind of what we talked about earlier about that exercise of asking the questions helps get to the heart of things without being accusatory. I mean, that's to boil all that down into one phrase. It took a while to get there, but it allows you to get to the heart of things, right? Like what the problem is, whose fault it is, without pointing fingers, right? It allows discovery to happen. And more often than not, what you'll see is that the person or whoever this issue is over allows them the self-discovery. right? Even if they don't know, or self-realization, or being able to point out to the team or to the leader, hey, look, yeah, this, I dropped the ball here. I can see that now. And again, it allows you to get to the intended results without creating this kind of toxic top-down mentality of leadership.
Hmm. I really appreciate what you said about getting to that more of a curiosity mindset, not just asking questions,
Mhm.
but actually being curious is different because it does seem like, when there is something contentious or somebody feels frustrated or upset about something, it's easy to turn a question into an accusation or something like you said. And then, but to kind of go back into, well, what's really going on here? I don't even know. Some humility there to recognize that I don't even know really what's happening. I just need to, maybe that's what I go into, like sort of this investigative and gently mode to
Mhm.
find out, like, okay, so what's happening here? And well, do you realize that what you said there was actually really offensive to me or whatever?
Yeah.
Like it can certainly help, but the mindset is key.
Yeah, I almost kind of approach it this sense of like, help me understand,
Yeah.
right? Like I want to learn from you,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I'm asking questions to guide you through a process to help me understand versus me telling you what the problem is. Yeah.
Yeah, and not even just to help me understand so that you I'm helping you prove your point, but
Right.
like sometimes I feel like that can also happen where somebody's like, well, explain it to me, kind of thing. But yeah, there's just a difference. I think it's good for us to point this out. That's really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And something I was talking about, we kind of moved away from a little bit, but your story of talking about your husband in the car in decision-making process, something that happened to my wife and I probably about 2 or 3 months ago now, also goes to the importance of asking the right questions.
Mm,
In an operational standpoint, again, it's that's asking the right questions when you're gathering the information to make the decision, getting truly to the heart of what you want to know, and not asking superficial questions or questions that are bogged down into what already exists as opposed to the possibility. So my wife and I independently were both tired of our cell phones and we're looking to see, could we upgrade? We would reach the year and a half mark, not quite the two, but like we wanted to upgrade our phones earlier. What deals were out there with our cell phone provider? So, um, I didn't know my wife had looked into this, so I started looking into it, and I said, "Hey, I think we should change. We have to upgrade to this plan, but it's like a $2 difference a month. Like no big deal, but plus we get some extra benefits. So I think we should do this." She goes, "Well, I actually talked to the company 2 weeks ago, and there's a big problem with the upgrade. We're going to lose our international credits." I said, "Oh," I was like, that's not what I gathered from my research is like we know like we just have international data included now." She goes, "No, I specifically asked the lady, hey, what happens to our credits if we upgrade? Do they go away?" Honest question. That's what she thought we needed to know. And the lady gave an honest response. She goes, "Oh yeah, those go away. Those no longer exist if you upgrade." But what she really wanted to know is what happens, how does our new plan handle international data? And the answer was it's included. So you no longer need the credits. Yes, they go away because there's already 140 countries in the world where you get data included. And so it really goes to, and I asked my wife's permission before I ever use this in interviews and books and stuff. But it goes to the parts of asking the right question, right? Like what we really want to know is what's all included in this plan, and then more specifically, how does it handle data, international data when we travel globally, and but only focusing on an element that existed in one plan that wasn't needed in the other one, it missed the mark.
mm. I think that's a really good point. So, like, making sure to even ask the question, is this the right question to be
Yeah,
asking to find out what we really need to know?
right, right. Yeah, if you're not asking the right questions, it's not going to help you solve the problem. And sometimes if you're not asking the right questions, you might even be solving the wrong problem, period. Right? Because you're not getting to the heart of what the issue is, because you're not going deep enough or direct enough into the situation to truly find out, what it is that we're trying to solve.
Mm. Okay, so I heard you telling part of a story on another show, and I was wondering if you could maybe expand for us a little bit. I'm not totally sure exactly where the story was going, so I'm going to kind of let you decide what makes sense. But you were talking about rebuilding some operational teams. Like you went into a situation where you were going through and rebuilding team by team and that sort of thing. I'm wondering if do you know what I'm talking about?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, good. Can you share some context around that? And like, first of all, just like what position were you in? Why were you doing that? And then we'll go into more.
Sure. So, obviously, there's elements that I do for kind of my entire career, especially now as a consultant. But the way you described it pinpoints exactly. I know which organization. So I was hired as kind of a change agent COO. The organization had been in the red for 3 years when I came in. They just reduced half their staff, and they had come. And this was coming off of like 3 or 4 years of tremendous growth, and all of a sudden it fell apart. I mean, it was kind of a house of cards scenario. And my background, I'd worked in this industry before, in another job, and had been moving up the ranks into kind of the COO level. And so it really was a great fit. It was a dream job for me, and it really allowed me to make a lot of impact. And so I was, obviously as a COO, one of my key jobs is finance and administration department. So I started there because that's kind of my department, and rebuilt that. And they had all kinds of things were happening in this organization. My predecessor had drawn a diagram of our software solutions on a whiteboard, and it was a spider web. Like, this person over here wanted something that connects to this, and then someone in this department wanted a very similar software, and so they were allowed to do it, and it just became this nightmare of software solutions that we had to untangle. We had to get some accounting right. We had to get some employment issues right, departments right. But the biggest thing about this organization that I believe was the biggest impact that I brought was the culture side. It was a very micromanaged organization. It was, follow these steps, do these steps no matter what. They had lost sight of driving results. When I talked earlier about operational excellence is driving your intended results, is what you're doing, driving those results in the most efficient and effective way. And they kind of lost that. So after I dealt with my own department, I went to marketing, I went to programs, I went to um, uh, partnerships, and really just started kind of diving in and learning things. I mean, like, this is kind of how off the mark the organization was in some regard. Is we lost our director of marketing. They left, and someone, our HR consultant, had stepped in a temporary role just to kind of help manage the team. Not that she was a marketing expert. And she comes to my office and grabs me. She goes, "Jon, you need to come to this meeting, because I don't know what's going on here, but something tells me something's not right." So I come and sit down, and the person who oversees the marketing budget, our marketing process, is giving an update on where things were. And she's like, "Don't worry. Like, I'm the worrier. No one needs to worry, but we're a little behind where we thought we should be. This, and that." And so I get out my phone and my calculator, and I start crunching some numbers. And after she kind of started talking, I asked a few questions. And after I had all the information I needed, I raised my hand. I said, you know, based upon what you're saying, we're probably going to have $1 million shortage at the end of the year. And this is an organization coming off 3 years of decline, just under half their staff, and it was a very laissez-faire conversation about us, really being 15 to 20% behind where we should be, in that part of the year, and just kind of brushing it off. So again, I had and part of it was this was an employee, not to her fault, was never empowered she oversaw a $2.5 million marketing budget and never saw our full budget.
Mm.
She'd been in this position for 3 or 4 years, had never seen the organization's budget because it was kept close to certain people's chest. I did some things like opening that up. I was like, I want you to see, like, of our $8-9 million budget, your budget is 2.5. You have the biggest departmental budget. You need to own this. You need to understand this. You need to understand the impact that when we're trending 15-20% behind where we should be at this point, what that means at the end of the year and what that means to the staff who work in this organization. So she was a really good sport about all of this. And actually, I really saw a big difference from her after this moment to where she really started owning that a little bit more. We had some more one-on-one conversations to go over stuff, so it wasn't happening in a big group meeting. I certainly didn't intend to, drop the bomb on her in a group setting. It just kind of happened. But again, she really took it in stride. She understood where I was coming from, and again, because I think I had started building that culture around results, around holding people accountable, and us working together to solve problems, it made that moment a lot easier.
So, Jon, then when you came into this situation, you were labeled where you told people knew that you were a change agent. And was that intimidating to people? How did they respond to you? How did you make that work?
So I'd been in several environments to where I was leading some serious change. Sometimes staff wise, again, my career started in the nonprofit association space. So sometimes there's volunteers that I'm leading change through, and that's probably even more difficult than staff in many, many ways. I've led some board change as well in helping drive how they see the organization and that sort of stuff. So at this point, I'd really gotten really comfortable with change. And I think my personality really allows me to tackle things from a very analytical and strategic way, but also with empathy and understanding how the change affects people. So yeah, I mean, I kind of came in and this was a situation where the gloves kind of had to come off, right? Like, guys, look, we just laid off half the staff. Everyone wants to keep their job. I want you to keep your job. The president and CEO wants you to keep your job. We got to figure out how to make this work. And so I let them know, like, hey guys, look, I want to change the culture to be more of this. I defined it up front. Like, this is what I expect from you, what I expect from myself, and how we're going to work on this together. And there got to be a point. We hired we upstaffed some more other areas that had been let go, and kind of rounded out the team. I think we had a really good, solid team. And I was working again by department, but I started running into something. And so I had to be listening. I had to be curious, right, of how people are perceiving things. But something started sticking out to me. The very word change was becoming a sticking point. Because for these staff, who were all smart, very hardworking people, they were a wonderful, wonderful group. In their head, they were hearing, but I am doing exactly what I would have been told to do for the last 3 years or last 2 years or last 6 months, whatever it is. So they saw the word change as me saying you're doing something wrong.
Right. Right.
Right. So even though it wasn't my intent to point fingers, I really meant to change, to pivot. So I changed the nomenclature I use from change to redirection.
Okay.
And that really kind of opened it up for them. So, I had to get them to say, okay, we're going down this path. We need to go this way, right? So I'm not asking you to change because you did something wrong. I'm asking you to redirect because we're learning that what we were doing and how we are doing it wasn't working. And so we're in this together, right? We're here to figure this out. We solve problems. I really made the review process. It was one of those organizations that still had the rate the employer from 1 to 10 in these areas, blah, blah, blah. Mine became narrative, right? Like, what do you like about your job? What would you change about your job? What would make your job easier? What would make your job better? How can we support you in your role? You make it not so much that 360 angle, but creating that psychological safety net where they felt through our review process, showing them that we care about their role, the impact they're making in their role, and how we can make it better for them to help them make a bigger impact. And so all of that kind of came together and really started building that culture to where they started trusting everyone a little bit more. weren't afraid of change, weren't afraid of correction, but it took a little bit of time for sure.
Hmm. I love that. Redirect instead of
Yeah.
change. That's fantastic. It's it's a de-escalating kind of a word for sure.
Mhm.
Is there anything else that you want to say about your book before we kind of start to wrap up?
So the book was an amazing experience to write. And actually it actually was the second book that I wrote. The first one I wrote is not published yet. It was more a book on the personal side, but the Curious Leader book just kind of came together as I started researching and putting it all together. And again, these are all concepts and thoughts and ideas I've had for years, right? But to kind of put them all together and bring it together, I think it's really beneficial for any type of leader, whether you're leading a volunteer group or you're CEO of a company or a department head, whatever it may be, or just running your own household. There's some elements of that can help everyone in every aspect of life. And I do have a quick little giveaway. If people want to text chapter to 33777, we'll send a PDF of the first chapter of the book as kind of, let them see it first before they buy it, if you will. So if anyone wants to do that, again, just the word chapter, text it to 33777, and we'll send you a PDF of the first chapter.
Okay, that's cool. So, do you want to say anything else about how the people can connect with you?
Yeah. So also my personal brand site is jonbassford.com, and my consulting firm is think-lateral.com. The company's Lateral Solutions. Kind of actually a funny story how I came up with that name. But right now, we're really working on expanding our consulting with the audit and coaching aspect of our business. Me on the personal side, really working on expanding speaking in the workshops I do for everything from 300 to 400 person kind of convention style to small teams and in boardrooms. So I really love connecting with people from different ways. And so if there's something that I might be able to help your audience with, feel free to reach out.
Great. And we'll link to all that in the show notes. All right. I actually have two wrap up questions. So, first one is when you think about the mentors who've impacted you the most, what is something that they did that now you try to do for others?
Yeah, I would say my main first boss. I guess I kind of had two there at the very, very beginning, but the one that was with me the longest for that organization, uh, he gave me the freedom to explore. This is my very first job. I fell into this job. It was an organization. I was a member of a law school. Really didn't know what I want to do with my career. Pretty sure I didn't want to practice law, but didn't know for sure. So he really gave me the opportunity to explore. When I said, "Hey, look, let me take on this. Let me do that. Let me do that." Like there are so many things I took on in my first role, which is what allowed me to grow into the operational professional I became because I got to have my hands in every little bit pieces of everything in the organization and take on things like budgeting, take on things like governance, and really just play around and see what I liked and what I through that allowed me to discover my jack of all trades kind of personality and knowledge is perfect for operations. And that really allowed me to explore that and find that. So anytime I have a chance to someone on my team or someone I'm working with to explore their interests and efforts, I always do that. I don't know if we're going over here, but a quick kind of side note: if you haven't heard of Google or 3M's innovation policies. One is 80/20, one is 85/15, but they allow their staff 20 to 15% of their time to work on a project unrelated to their daily projects. And that's actually how we got Gmail. It's how we got Post-it notes. Was someone working on the side discovering these products? So it's amazing not just what you can do for your staff in helping them grow, but what that freedom, that curiosity, that creativity can actually do for your organization.
All right. So, if you could offer one challenge to someone who wants to help shape the future, what would it be?
I would say learn to be curious and question. I think the best thing that we can do to constantly improve and grow as individuals, as organizations, as countries, as citizens, as the world, whatever it may be, is to be curious about what is happening, why it's happening, and constantly be working to find better ways.
Great. All right. So you can go find the Curious Leader, Unlocking Innovation, Empowering Teams, and Driving Change. Thanks so much for being with us today, Jon.
Thank you for having me.